Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Mindful in Minutes podcast. I'm Kelly, and today we are going to be talking about social media, your attention span, and the idea of dopamine detoxes. So basically, we're going to look at how our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, courtesy of social media, and what that means for us at large, and what we can do to potentially reverse that. And you probably can hear in my voice that I'm on cold number 19 of the year. I don't know how many weeks we're in April, so however many weeks we've had in 2025, at least double that. And I think that's how many colds I've had, courtesy of my children. So I apologize for the cranky voice. But yeah, my voice may not sound like it, but I am very excited about today's episode because I started looking into it. I was researching, and then one thing led to another. And before I know it, I have 15 pages of notes for this episode. So we will see what transpires. Granted, the text, maybe the font is, I don't know, it's only 0.12 font. That's normal, isn't it? I was going to say maybe the font's really big, but it's actually not. I just have a lot to say about this one, and I found a lot that I thought was so fascinating, and I didn't want to leave any of it out. So yeah, that's that. This is the plan. I want to talk about the science of attention and dopamine, how social media is designed to kind of hijack your brain. Also, this isn't going to be me just necessarily like poo-pooing social media. I'm obviously on social media. I love it. I love connecting with all of you there. I think it can be a really great place. I think that it's just when we spend so much time on it that's what we're going to be focusing on. Not that like social media is awful and everyone should delete all the apps. It's just like, what do you do when you get sucked into social media and like you spend so much time on it? Then I want to talk about this idea of dopamine detoxes because I have been like personally victimized by these targeted ads for certain apps that will not stop telling me that I need a dopamine detox. I'm like, what does this even mean? And that's really what inspired it. I was like, what does this mean? And so I had to look into it. And what I found was really interesting. It wasn't what I thought. And then we're going to talk about ways to strengthen your attention span. And yeah, so that's that. Let's just dive in because, like I said, 15 pages of notes because I don't know. I can't stop learning about this. So I think we need to start kind of at the science behind attention and also a little bit about dopamine, but we're going to dive into that more. But I was kind of curious because I keep hearing about, and I feel this myself, about how our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. And, social media and TikTok and our modern day lives are giving us goldfish brains and all of that. And so I was like, how does our attention really work? And so attention is your brain's ability to focus selectively on specific information while ignoring other stimuli. So it's really, I talk about meditation as like the mind is a light bulb, right? The light is on, it's shining in all directions. When you meditate, you're taking that light bulb and you're turning it into a laser and you're pointing it at just one thing. Think of your mind, if it's, again, a light bulb, when you're focusing or you're putting your attention on something, it's not necessarily turning it into a laser, but it's kind of like turning it into a spotlight. So then it's illuminating just like a part of what's happening in front of you. And so that you can really kind of process it more deeply, you can see it more clearly, you can focus on it. So, and this could be a conversation, a thought, a task. It could be like if you're on your phone, whatever you're doing for reading a book, that kind of thing. So if our mind is a light bulb, when we're focusing on something or putting our full attention on something, that light bulb turns into a spotlight. When we're meditating, that spotlight turns into a laser. And there's a few different types of attention. So there's sustained attention, which is focusing on just one task over time. So like reading a book. There's selective attention, which is filtering out distractions. So it's like if you're at a party or you're in a restaurant and there's a lot of noise, but you're listening to just one person, you're having a conversation with them. You're filtering out all the other distractions and conversations happening around you so you can focus on the one that you're having right there. Then there is divided attention. And this is where you're attempting to focus on multiple things at once. So maybe like you're texting while you're watching TV, or you are having a conversation with your kid while you're trying to write a work email. Then there is alternating attention. This is switching between tasks. So like answering a phone call and then going back to an email. It could be, again, if you're trying to write an email and having a conversation with your kid, it can be telling them, no, you can't have more whatever goldfish, and then going back to whatever you're doing, right? So you're switching, you're alternating between these different things. So there's different types of attention. We're going to be kind of talking about the idea of attention at large, but also really focusing on that sustained attention. So like trying to focus on one task over time, because that seems to really be the one that is suffering based on just kind of our current day life and habits and social media and phone consumption. So how does attention work? So attention is not like a single function. It's not like there's one attention part of the brain. It's more about this network of processing that involves multiple brain systems. So it involves the prefrontal cortex, which you guys know. We know her, we love her, we talk about her all the time. That's the part right behind the forehead, the parietal lobes, the thalamus, and the brainstem. And this is sort of how it works. So we start with the prefrontal cortex. This is kind of like the manager, the CEO, the boss of focus. It's responsible for decision-making, goal setting, and concentration. That's why we talk about it all the time in this podcast, because we know that when we meditate, our brain is basically quieting the amygdala, which is the pain, fear, worry center of the brain. And then we get a lot of activity, like focused activity in the prefrontal cortex, which has to do with some of that decision-making, but also concentration, focus, and some emotion regulation. So we're talking about that same prefrontal cortex. It manages kind of this top-down control, which means that you get to consciously choose what to focus on. And it's also involved in resisting impulses. So it's the part of your brain that's trying to ignore like the phone going off or the text notifications while you are writing something or studying. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for being like, no, you don't need to respond to that text message right now because you are working on your French homework or whatever it is. Then the parietal lobes, they have to do with spatial attention and awareness. So these lobes help to shift attention between objects or tasks. So they play a role in like scanning the environment and determining where attention should go. So again, if you're in that party and it's loud, but you're talking to someone and then you hear your name from across the room and then your parietal lobes are like, oh, pay attention over there, someone's talking to me. They're kind of helping to shift attention between things, scanning the environment and then being like, oh, I should pay attention to that. Then we have the thalamus, which does a lot of work with like sensory. So it routes sensory information to the right areas of the brain and filters what gets noticed. So it decides what's worth kind of sending up to your conscious awareness. So think about how you're getting sensory input all day long. I think about physical sensory input, right? Like your clothes. You're not consciously, right now I'm wearing a sweatshirt, so I'm not consciously sitting there thinking, being like, oh, I can feel the slight weight of my big sweatshirt on my shoulders. I don't think about that and consciously process that all day long as I'm wearing this same sweatshirt. It's only if maybe someone touches my shoulder or the pressure changes there, and then my thalamus is like, oh, something's different. And then it'll filter it and say, notice this, pay attention, even though we're constantly all day long getting this sensory information. Then we have this thing called the reticular activating system. This has to do with sort of like alertness and arousal. So it's in the brainstem, and this system really regulates wakefulness and alertness. So it really influences whether you're in like a highly focused state, or maybe you're feeling more distracted or potentially foggy. So we have those four main players in the brain when it comes to focus and attention: the prefrontal cortex, the parietal lobes, the thalamus, and then the reticular activating system. And they're all working together to sort of work on your attention, or to have sort of this attention system in your brain. There's also some neurotransmitters neurotransmitters, involved in attention. So you have dopamine. This is the one we're going to talk a lot about in just a little bit, but it's involved in motivation and reward, and it helps you to want to focus, especially if the task feels meaningful or novel. And dopamine is why like scrolling on social media feels so effortless. It's because it's giving you that like quick, unpredictable reward. And when it comes to dopamine, think about it as well, like when something feels meaningful or novel, like when you're really interested in something, for example, if you're watching like a really captivating documentary on Netflix and you're just like, you're watching it and you're really into it, right? It feels meaningful. It's something that has really kind of grabbed your attention. You're getting that sort of like motivation and reward, and it makes it easier to focus on something that is meaningful or grabbing your attention. Then we have norepinephrine, and this helps to regulate alertness and sort of vigilance. So it is released during stress. Sometimes norepinephrine gets a bad rap, but it also gets released when something is urgent or important. So it can help sharpen your focus on things like potential threats or high stakes tasks. So it is important when it comes to attention, right? If you're walking, I'll use my same bear analogy, but you're walking, you're hiking, and all of a sudden a bear crosses your path, like you're going to want to be able to focus in on what that bear is doing and not being like, oh, well, would you look at that? There's a bird flying by. Oh, what a beautiful butterfly. And so it's really important to sharpen that focus for potential threats, but also high stakes tasks. Then we have acetylcholine. This one I didn't know that much about, so I really liked learning more about it. But acetylcholine plays a role in helping you maintain attention and focus while completing tasks, which enables you to learn new things. So it's going to support sustained attention and learning, and it also helps you tune into sort of specific stimulus during memory formation. So this one's really important for that long-term attention and also learning and memory formation, which I didn't know. I'd heard of acetylcholine. And so then when I was looking into it, I was like, how do I know about this? Like, what is it about acetylcholine? And I think I had heard about it because it also has to do, we're not going to talk about this necessarily, but like work with like your muscles and like muscle contractions and things like that. And I think that's where I had heard of it, but I had no idea that it also has to do with like focus and helping you maintain your attention. So I thought that was so interesting. Now, when it comes to like the attention cycle, so those are the key players. This is how, if you think about your attention in like one big cycle or like a wheel, this is how it actually plays out. And I want to do like a quick little caveat here because I can hear all of my other neurodivergent friends like me, because this is my first thought too. I was like, is this cycle different if you have ADHD or you're neurodivergent? And the answers that I found are yes, no, maybe. And I think I want to maybe do a separate episode on this, on like attention and particularly like ADHD, and maybe have like a guest chat about that. But what I found, just in a nutshell, so this is very, very high level. This is not like the end all be all. In theory, no, what I'm about to say, it shouldn't necessarily be different. However, when it comes to specifically the ADHD mind, because we already have a harder time with attention, it's not that it necessarily should take a different cycle. It's just that we can be more easily sidetracked, or like we have a hard time filtering out some of that other information. So I thought of it as like, if this is the cycle or this is the path on a road and we're trying to go from like point A to point B, in the ADHD brain, it's sort of like there's other like detours and roadblocks or things that will just make getting from point A to point B a little bit more challenging. But the question that I had sort of posed, that I was looking into, is this actual attention cycle different? Like, does it just straight up take a different path with someone with ADHD? And I didn't find anything that concretely said, yes, it's a different path. Sort of just said, no, the process should still be the same. It just, sometimes in your brain, it can be a little bit more challenging getting from point A to point B. So I just wanted to call that out. And I do think I want to, as I was writing this, I was like in my mind thinking, I was like, who do I know that's like really good at like the ADHD brain that we could sort of talk about this? But yeah, so I know I have a lot of neurodivergent friends out there. And so I wanted to call that out too. So this isn't necessarily exclusively for like a neurotypical brain, but just know in your brain, it might be a little bit more challenging to get from point A to point B. But in theory, this should be the cycle for you as well. Okay, the attention cycle and how it plays out. So it starts with a stimulus appears, right? So our phone goes off, we get an email alert, someone says our name, whatever. The RIS, the reticular activating system, that's going to sort of activate alertness and go, oh, what was that? Then the thalamus is going to filter the stimulus. So it's going to say, is this important or can it be ignored, right? The thalamus is going to say, my phone just went off, or I just got a push notification. Maybe I'll look at it briefly and go, oh, that, I don't need to deal with that right now. Or it might go, oh, this person's calling me. They never call me. It's important. I should pick it up. Then the parietal lobe is going to direct spatial focus. So where is the important thing, right? What's going on? Where's my phone? All of that. Then the prefrontal cortex is going to decide whether to focus on it or ignore it. And then that's where the neurotransmitters kind of kick in to either maintain your focus on what you're doing or to shift focus. So quick recap, basically, let's say you're sitting there, you're reading a book, right? You're reading a book, you hear your phone ping. So we get that stimulus. Oh, the ping of the phone. Then the RAS is going to activate your alertness and go, oh, what was that? And then the thalamus is going to say, either keep focusing on the book or I should go see what that ping was about. Then the parietal lobes are going to say, okay, I'm going to figure out what that ping was about. I wonder who's messaging me. Where's my phone? I can hear it. What's going on? And then your prefrontal cortex, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to decide what you want to do about it. And then the neurotransmitters are going to help you either shift focus and say, I'm going to put I'm not going to go back to my book. I need to respond to this now. Or it's going to say, oh, this can wait till later. I'm going to go back to my book. That's how that attention cycles should work. And that entire loop happens in milliseconds. It's not, the way I describe it is that it's like over the course of like a minute, but that entire loop should just be like milliseconds, just like a beat. But it determines whether you stay focused on reading that book, for example, or if you're going to respond to that text or check Instagram or whatever it is. So all day long, this is happening constantly. All sorts of stuff. I'm sitting here recording this podcast episode and then I hear someone walking upstairs and then my attention, I'm like, oh, I wonder what's going on upstairs. And then, I come back down to, mentally shift gears back to recording this podcast episode. So this loop is just constantly going in this cycle, going nonstop. And it's quickly just this loop just happening and it's just constantly running in the background, right? Like it's just kind of like that computer app that's just always running in the background if you aren't necessarily like paying attention to it all the time. And then another concept that was new to me that I thought was really interesting is this idea of attention residue. So attention residue refers to this phenomenon where thoughts and mental energy from a previous task linger in your mind, making it harder to fully focus on the current task, which is impacting or can impact your productivity and performance. And when I started reading about this, I was like, this is my problem. I think I have an attention residue problem. So basically this is how it works, or at least this is how it works in my everyday life. So let's say you're sitting on the couch or scrolling Instagram or TikTok, and then you see a recipe that you like. So you're like, oh, I like that recipe, but I don't have everything that I need to make it. So then you switch to Instacart and you start ordering groceries. And then the groceries remind you that, my kid, or for me, it's like, oh, pork chop asked me for a banana like 2 minutes ago and I forgot to get it for him. So I get up off the couch and I'm like, oh, sorry, buddy, here you go. Here's the banana that you asked for. And then I forget what I was doing. So I go back to sit on the couch, I open up TikTok again, and then it's a new video. And then that's going to start another loop on whatever the thing that's fed to me is. And then I never actually finished ordering those groceries. And then maybe 20 minutes later, I'll go, oh my gosh, I started a grocery order and I never finished it. So then I'm going to have to go back to that. And it's like you can have this attention residue. And when you're trying to multitask, when you're trying to do multiple things at once, this attention residue makes it really hard to complete something like from point A to point B, because you're constantly being like, oh, I was working on this, or like, oh, I was thinking about that, and then I either didn't finish it, or let's say you sent someone an email and then you're like, oh, I wonder if they got back to me. And so having this attention residue is really getting in the way of being able to fully complete tasks, because you always have a little bit of this like leftover thought in your mind from things that you're just doing. You're like, oh, I was just reading that article and then I didn't finish it. And then you go back to that, and then that distracts you from something else you were doing, and you're just constantly shifting gears. It just gets in the way of actually being able to totally complete something from point A to point B. So let's talk about how social media is kind of rewiring our brain to be more distracted. So social media, of course, it's something that just really shapes like our modern life, our modern attention span, like how we connect with people, how we share our opinions, like how we spend our time, all of that. There are some good aspects to social media. I mean, it's allowed me to connect with people from all over. It can be a community builder, but when it comes to our attention span specifically, not always a good thing. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube in particular, they can be entertaining, but they're also really designed to like exploit our brain's reward system in a way that trains us to seek this constant like novelty, immediate gratification, and get these short bursts of stimulation. And the algorithms that are so good, like especially when I think about when I had TikTok, as if you listen to the last Freeform episode, I think, on things that I've changed, I have deleted TikTok off of my phone, but I do remember that like its algorithm is just so good. I was like, I had a thought about something, and then it would show up on like I didn't even speak it out loud or like talk about it. I just would like think about it, and then it would show up like, I'm like, how is this algorithm like reading my mind? And those algorithms are so good, and that is sort of the problem. So basically, here's how it's happening. So you have this kind of like scroll and reward loop. So social media platforms are really built on this variable reward schedule. So it's a system that gives you sort of this like unpredictable hit of dopamine in two different ways. So yes, through like when you're scrolling, for example, think of it as like those algorithms are kind of like a slot machine. So there's this uncertainty of what you'll see next that keeps you scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Then sometimes you'll get something, you'll be like, oh, I really like that one. Like it'll give you a little dopamine hit. Or sometimes it's the opposite too. You see something, you're like, that enrages me. Or like, oh, that's really curious. I'm curious about that. And it's just sort of like reinforcing that habit. And your brain begins to associate those quick like swipes or scrolls with these quick rewards. There's also, on the flip side, if you're posting on social media, it's also a little bit of that kind of slot sheen as well. So we get those little dopamine hits through likes and comments and, things like that, like share. I mean, I get it too. Like when I see that someone like shares a podcast, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so nice. Like, thank you for sharing, or whatever it is. And it gives you that little hit. And you also kind of get that slot machine aspect when you post something and you're like, well, I don't know, is this like going to go viral, or is no one going to like it, or you don't know how that post is going to perform. It was interesting, and there was a 2022 study from the University of California, Irvine, and they found that frequent social media use contributes to attention fragmentation. So when users become accustomed to like switching between tasks really rapidly, like for example, you're just swiping and you're kind of, scrolling through your FYP or whatever. I don't even know. What is it called on Instagram? I don't know. The Discover page, is that right? I don't know. And so when you're just scrolling through them, you then have more difficulty sustaining attention on a single activity. So just in general, it's basically training your brain to just be like flip, 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 like next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. And by doing this, it's rewiring your brain's reward circuit. So over time, this constant exposure to highly stimulating short form content leads to reduced tolerance for boredom. This is where, when I started getting into these notes, I was like, this is both fascinating and kind of scary, because I see it in myself too. So reduced tolerance for boredom, right? Like, this is a thing when I tell people that like, oh, I lived with the monks and like I couldn't have a cell phone. I wasn't allowed to read and I had to take a vow of silence. Like, weren't you so bored? And it's like, we just have this complete aversion to quote like boredom, or like not doing anything, and it's just getting worse and worse. We have impatience with slower content. So things like books, even long conversations. This is the one that I think is so interesting, is that we're having a hard time having long, meaningful conversations without checking our phones, without having our distraction pulled elsewhere. Like just sitting and connecting and having a long conversation has become so much harder for us. And then, of course, just sitting with yourself. This, I think, is something, at least as long as I've been doing this, I hear this from people, even like 10 years ago, before TikTok, before, you know, things have gotten worse and worse and worse. People feel uncomfortable just sitting with themselves. And I think it used to have more to do with being uncomfortable just sitting with your own thoughts. And then you like actually feel things, or like, you're like, oh, I am like not feeling that happy. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Just kind of being afraid of like, if I'm not constantly stimulated or overstimulated and I just sit with myself, like what's going to come up. But now I think it does have to do with sort of this inability to just sit and be. So we really lost the art of being able to just sit with yourself. And then we have a lower threshold for distraction, which you might think is a little bit counterintuitive, but this lower threshold for distraction, it's basically like you're just so easily distracted. It's like you can't get distracted and then come back, get distracted and come back. It's like every little thing is then distracting us, and we're just sort of like, looking at everything is like distraction, 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 distraction. Like we can't sort of do that filtering out and being like, oh, I'm distracted for a moment, but then I can come back. There is also it was a podcast episode that was talking about a study that was done by the American Psychiatric Association, the APA. And it explained that basically these dopamine-driven habits change both neural structures and behavioral patterns, making it harder to engage with activities that require delayed gratification or sustained mental effort. So they did this study and they looked at like social media use, I believe, and how when you have these sort of quick dopamine-driven habits, it's not only changing our behavioral patterns, but it's actually changing our neural structure. So it's just harder for us neurologically to engage with activities that require delayed gratification or sustained mental effort. The example they used is like reading a book. There was also this kind of famous Microsoft study from 2015, so 10 years ago. So I couldn't find like a good updated one, but they found that the average human attention span, which I believe was about 40 seconds or so, if I'm pulling this from the top of my head, so it might not be like exact. I want to say they looked at it in like the 70s or the 80s, and our attention span was still about 40 seconds or about 30, 40 seconds. And then in 2015, they found that the average human attention span had dropped to 8 seconds, which is shorter than a goldfish. So that, again, I told you this is where we get into the section of the episode that's fascinating and terrifying at the same time. And then more recent data is showing that attention fragmentation is getting worse, especially in younger generations who grew up with smartphones and tablets or iPads, which, I mean, makes sense. The thing that I think about a lot that I think this is just me hypothesizing. This is not me, this isn't, there's no study on this that I know of. I couldn't find a good one. But I feel like the thing that's really tricky, especially for younger kids, and I find myself doing this too sometimes, it's multiple screens at once. It's scrolling on Instagram while trying to watch a show at the same time. Or it's, you're doing something on your laptop and simultaneously trying to do something on your phone at the same time. And I think this is what's really getting us in terms of, because not only is what we're doing like screen time shortening our attention span, but then we're fragmenting our attention by doing like two at once. We're just like ping pong, like bouncing from one screen to the other. And a lot of times it's scrolling on social media while trying to watch a show. So we're trying to keep up with the show, we're bouncing our attention there, and then we have this quick like swipe, 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 swipe on our phones. And again, this is just my personal hypothesis. I think that's what's like really gets, and I do this too sometimes. I do this too. I like my little puzzle games. This makes me probably sound like a 65-year-old woman, but I do sometimes like to do like my little puzzle game, like while I'm watching a show. But I really try not to ever do like social media and a show at the same time or, whatever. So yeah, that one. And we know that younger generations are having an even harder time because they grew up with smartphones, with this fragmented. So not being able to just sit and focus on like one task. So what all this means for us is that the cumulative effect of this constant stimulation is it's really just putting our attention system in overdrive. So our brains crave this constant input. It's just like, I want more input. And we feel discomfort or boredom even when things just slow down. So it's not even like we are just doing nothing. We're just sitting with ourselves and then we're like, oh, I feel uncomfortable. I feel bored. Even when things are just slower and we sort of get in this constant like, come on, let's go. And I just think that this is fascinating that I knew we had an extreme discomfort when we were, quote, doing nothing or just sitting with ourselves or trying to meditate, things like that. But even when things just are slower, we feel this discomfort and we lose our ability to really immerse ourselves in a single task or thought. And so Dr. Gloria Mark, she wrote this book that's pretty well known called Attention Span. So if you're interested in all of this, like you will love her work, Dr. Gloria Mark. And she has this quote that I think is really interesting. And it says, the cost of this constant distraction is more than just productivity. It's our presence, our relationships, and even our sense of self. And the thing that really stuck out to me on this is the relationships piece and how our inability, and I think about, we've lost the ability, or we're seeing that people are having a harder time just having a long form engaged conversation without being distracted, without seeking other input. And like, this is one of my favorite things to do. There is nothing I love more than like just sitting down with a pal and like just chatting and like looking into that person's eyes, talking about whatever. Like, it's one of my favorite things about retreats is like the moments in between the moments where it's like we're just sitting and eating dinner and like talking. And like, I love long form conversations. And so the thought of like that many of us are struggling to do that because of our attention span makes me feel sad, but also it makes sense that then that's rippling into our relationships because we're constantly trying to do these other things. We have this attention residue. We're trying to switch between different things. We feel uncomfortable just sitting and doing one thing. That of course it's going to ripple into the relationships that we have with our partners, but also like our friends, with our family members, with like our kids. I don't know, that one just really stuck out to me. So I had to include it. Okay, so what are some signs or some symptoms of this hijacked brain, which is the term that I kept finding when I was researching this? And if you're thinking, Kelly, I wonder if this applies to me. Here's some things that may tell you if maybe we're spending a little too much time on social media, maybe we're being overstimulated. I don't know, hijacked brain just sounds really aggressive, but this is what you should look out for. And this is what it actually feels like when your attention span has really started to decrease or been eroded. So let's just talk about it. So some things that you may notice is that you're struggling to focus on books or deep tasks. So books is a great one to, even if you don't like reading, this is a great one to kind of test your attention span. So if you sit down to read and after a few sentences your mind wanders, or if you check your phone mid-paragraph or you reread the same line multiple times, this can be a sign of we've got some trouble here. So even work tasks or conversations that used to hold your attention maybe now feel mentally taxing. That's going to be another one. And why this happens is your brain has been conditioned to prefer fast-paced, bite-sized information and deep work or long-form content like a book, which is also black and white and not like stimulating colors like on your phone. It no longer delivers enough instant dopamine to really hold your interest. So I think a great check for where your attention span is at is even like start a timer like in your kitchen. Just put your phone somewhere else or put it like on the coffee table on your nightstand or something. And then start a timer and pick up a book, and start reading. And notice how many times within, like, you can even set a timer for even 20 minutes. How many times do you either reach for your phone to check it, or do you look at your phone, or do you start thinking about something else, and just kind of track it? And it might give you an idea of like how well you're able to focus on like non-stimulating long form content. Just give you a kind of like litmus test. Another one is going to be compulsive phone checking. So you feel a reflex to check your phone even when there's no notifications. You open up Instagram or TikTok or email without even realizing it. It's just sort of like muscle memory. And also you may experience a sense of discomfort or even like FOMO if you're away from your phone too long. And why this happens is basically you're kind of stuck in that classic like dopamine reward loop. So your brain associates quick like digital hits with like pleasure, with dopamine, and it's craving the next one, even if there isn't actually one waiting. So you're picking up your phone all the time, checking it all the time, like looking for that quick dopamine hit. Irritability or boredom without stimulation. So silence makes you feel uncomfortable. You reach for your phone in any moment of stillness or silence. If you're waiting in line, if you're sitting at a red light, if you're in bed, if a conversation lulls a little bit, you feel agitated or bored quickly if something's not like immediately engaging. And why this happens is that your brain is overstimulated, and anything that doesn't provide that instant novelty or excitement or stimulation kind of feels like a letdown, and you become dopamine desensitized. So in a moment, we're going to talk about dopamine, these dopamine detoxes. And like, spoiler alert, you can't really detox. A dopamine detox isn't really like a thing. I'll talk about what is a thing, but you're becoming dopamine desensitized. So you're less able to enjoy slower, like kind of more like subtleties in nice things or pleasures or enjoyment. Fragmented thinking and shorter mental endurance. So you are having trouble holding a train of thought or remembering what you were doing. Maybe you bounce between tasks or tabs or thoughts without completing any of them, and your mental stamina feels lower. It's like you just mentally get tired faster. Why this is happening is because this frequent like switching, this sort of like, especially like the digital multitasking, it overloads your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that manages attention planning and decision making. And it's like opening too many apps on your phone, and then like everything starts to slow down. Another one is emotional reactivity and restlessness. So you feel more anxious, impatient, or frustrated. You're more likely to snap at others or lose your cool quickly, and you're sitting still or doing nothing. Like when you do that, it just feels like uncomfortable or even unbearable. So why this is happening is that when your attention system is dysregulated, your emotional regulation system is too. And so these two are really connected. We know that like the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and like all these parts of the brain are talking to one another, and they're connected. So if your attention system is dysregulated, it's also going to dysregulate like your nervous system and your emotional regulation. So it can make you kind of on edge, sort of snappy, irritable, anxious, impatient, frustrated, that kind of stuff, which can it can make it hard to sort of tamper your impulse control sometimes as well. So a scattered mind is often more emotionally reactive. So let's switch gears and talk about dopamine. You've heard me mention dopamine, but I want to dive a little bit more into like, what is dopamine? How does it work? And then I want to talk about these dopamine detoxes. So what is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It is a chemical messenger in the brain that's primarily involved in motivation, reward, pleasure, movement, learning, and habit formation. It's not like the pleasure chemical, as people say sometimes. It's actually kind of more of like the anticipation and motivation chemical. So dopamine gives you that like go get it or like go get it done energy to pursue things that the brain believes will bring a reward. So dopamine plays a role in several key brain systems. So the reward system, this reinforces behaviors that feel good, like eating, praise, things that are fun, sex, that sort of stuff. And then the motivation circuit, that really drives you towards goals to keep you working to achieve them. So sometimes you hear this with people who are starting either like a fitness journey or potentially like a weight loss journey. And then when you start seeing the results in your body, then you're like, oh, then that like motivates you to keep going, where it's hard at first because you feel like you're doing all this hard work and you're not like seeing those results. But this kind of like dopamine motivation circuit, you hear a lot about it when you start a fitness journey and you start to like see the results. Or sometimes you'll even hear this in meditation too, where like people at first will be like, oh, why am I meditating? I'm not seeing a huge shift in my anxiety. But then kind of around that like 8-ish week mark, and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel as anxious anymore, right? And it motivates you to keep going and to continue that habit. Dopamine's also involved in attention and focus. So it keeps you engaged in tasks that seem worthwhile. And that's the key piece there. Tasks that seem worthwhile. So not like tons, I'm not getting this like big dopamine hit when I'm like picking up my kid's shoes off the floor for the 10,000th time, even though I asked them to put it in the basket. That doesn't seem like a super worthwhile task to me, but like staying engaged and whipping out 15 pages of notes in one sitting on this podcast episode because I'm like engaged and this is worthwhile, definitely. All right, then there's the learning loop. So it helps your brain remember what led to rewards so you'll repeat it because our brain is adaptable, right? We see this a lot on the flip side, like anxiety, that our brains remember, oh, there was a threat last time I was here, or this makes me feel this way. This triggers my anxiety. And your brain's going to remember where those potential threats or dangers or triggers are. And then you'll find yourself then adapting to that. So maybe you'll like avoid that place. It's a safety mechanism, right? This is like the flip side where it's kind of that like feel good reward system where our brain's going to remember like, oh, last time I did that, I got this dopamine hit. That felt good. I want to continue to feel good. I'm going to continue to do it. So think of dopamine as more of like that spark that gets you to ask. It doesn't like reward you after you get the cookie, for example, but it lights up your anticipation of the cookie and then drives you to go and get it or put in whatever your favorite little treat is, because I love a good little treat. All right. Dopamine and social media, it really is like the perfect storm. Social media, as I said, is designed to kind of hijack your dopamine system. And this is how that works. So the dopamine feedback loop, it's all about like first novelty. And I always thought novelty kind of meant like boring, but it doesn't. Novelty is just like, I don't know, kind of new, different, interesting, pleasurable. So every scroll gives you something new and your brain loves this. Your brain is like, yes, new stimulus, give it to me. So we have novelty, we have unpredictability. So you don't know what the next post will be. It's like, again, think about slot machines. Like TikTok is so good at this one. Social rewards, likes, comments, follows. Each of these is like a mini dopamine hit. I feel it too, right? If I post something or someone shares the podcast, or I go on social media and I'm like, oh, someone said something really nice, or oh, so-and-so liked my post. It feels good. Then there's variable reinforcement. So when you're posting, you never know what you're going to get. And you also never know when you post what's going to happen either. It might be a viral post, maybe it gets tons of likes, sometimes not. And this inconsistency actually makes it more addictive because it feels like the slot machine or kind of like this Russian roulette with social media. So why this matters is that over time, your brain starts to expect like only high speed, high dopamine stimulation. So, quote, boring things like reading, sitting in silence, having a long conversation, meditating, it starts to feel uncomfortable. And this is going to lead to shortened attention spans, restlessness, boredom with low stimulation tasks, increased craving for digital stimulation, and then dopamine desensitization. I don't know why that one's so hard for me to get out. So basically, you need more to feel the same excitement. And this is how these apps are intentionally designed to create unpredictability and reward-seeking behavior. So kind of that get you in that like infinite scroll. And all of a sudden you're like, I've been scrolling and it's been like hours. Like I'm scrolling and I don't even really know what I'm processing. I'm just like scrolling. So that's all about dopamine, what it is, how it works. Now let's talk about these dopamine detoxes. Because I don't know if you guys have been I don't know who is on the marketing team of like these apps. I don't even want to like speak them out loud so that I just get even more like, and this isn't me. I know nothing about these apps. All I know is that their marketing is all around like this idea of like, you need a dopamine detox. And I have been getting targeted ads for these apps. And every time I see, like, the ads are really compelling. I'm like, what is this? It's always like a mom on a couch being like, I'm so tired. I'm scrolling on my phone. This is a sign you need a dopamine detox. And I'm like, I'm a tired mom. And sometimes I sit on the phone on the couch and scroll on my phone during rest time with the kids. Do I need a dopamine detox? And I see these all the time. Like, what is this? So I was like, is this real? So I was like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and figure out, is this a real thing or is it just like a marketing buzzword? Spoiler alert, kind of a marketing buzzword, but we're going to talk about it. So you've maybe heard the term dopamine detox, either in like targeted ads, but also I feel like it's gaining some speed in like wellness circles. It's actually a term that began like in 2020. And it's kind of framed as this like magical reset for your brain. But what does this all actually mean? What is it? What is it not? Does it work? All of that. You guys know you can always count on me to just like cut the fluff and just like get to the stuff because I'm curious. So what is a dopamine detox? So the idea, I went back, this phrase was first coined in, I believe, either it was coined in 2020 or I'm going to talk about how the guy who coined it loves to get into like internet fights, which we'll talk about in a second. So I can't remember if he started this idea of a dopamine detox in 2020, or that's just when he started getting into like internet beefs with people. But the idea of a dopamine detox was first popularized by Dr. Cameron, I believe it's Sepa. I tried to look it up. It said both. And he is a clinical psychologist and professor at UCSF. And the term itself has kind of been misunderstood and oversimplified since it hit the mainstream. So I did do just a quick look into Dr. Cameron Sepa. And I don't personally know this person. It does seem like, for someone who talks about dopamine detoxes, it does seem like he's online a lot and likes to pick fights with people on the internet. So if this goes back to him, do not pick a fight with me because I'm going to give you my quick take right now, which is basically like, I understand the concept of what he's saying, but I think that the actual term itself is a little bit misleading, which I think is then why some other people in a similar field are like, this isn't a real thing. And I see both sides. I understand why he's feeling a little bit defensive of what people are saying. And also I understand why other people in like the medical and psychology field are like, you should not call it this. Like, this isn't a real thing. So I'm neither. I'm just here sharing what I found. I'm not interested in internet beefs at all with people. Famously, we already know I already picked a fight with Ice Bath Bros. And I joke about that fight. Maybe like 3 people weren't like thrilled about it, but you know. I'm sorry. I do love my Ice Bath Bros. Okay. That was my one ADHD tangent. We are circling back. So I also bring up the fact that when I was looking into him, it seems like he does come off a little bit defensive and he does sometimes come off a little bit combative online. So I tell you all this because like, please don't go Googling him and then be like, this is the person that Kelly is recommending on her podcast. Nope. I'm just telling you the history of this term, dopamine detox. I don't want anyone to be surprised if they look and they're like, this guy kind of likes to fight with people on the internet. So here's kind of the core idea of like the dopamine detox. It's not about eliminating dopamine itself. Like, this is one, impossible, and also it would be dangerous. We need dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter. We need it. It's really not about like, quote, detoxing or necessarily like reducing your dopamine, for example. This concept of a dopamine detox, it's really about reducing overstimulation so that your brain can reset its reward system and then kind of resensitize to like natural, slower forms of pleasure and motivation. I love the concept, right? This is something, this is like meditation. This is what I care about, like to its core, of this same sort of like reducing overstimulation, like letting your brain and your body and your heart just be happier with things that are just like slower, just more simple, right? And not being in this like chronically overstimulated, anxious place. So I love the concept. It's kind of more of this like stimulation fast or like stimulation reset, reward system reset. And it's really about when I talked about a little bit earlier, how when we're always on social media, scrolling, all of that, we get desensitized to the dopamine. So we need a bigger stimulus, a bigger reward to feel the same. So it's kind of about like almost resensitizing yourself to sort of the natural flow of this reward system. So overall, the concept I think is really great and really interesting. But the thing that I understand, and this is where a lot of times kind of, not the controversy, but like when people talk about it online and they get upset about it, is this term dopamine detox. I think it's a really great marketing term, but I do think it's quite misleading as to what's happening like in this actual concept. But like it makes me stop and be like, what is it? What's going on here? Do I need a dopamine detox? And like, it made me do a whole deep dive into this. So I think that it's a great term to garner attention, but this idea of a dopamine detox really doesn't have that much to do with like detoxing anything. It's more about just like reducing overstimulation, kind of resetting that reward system so that you're not desensitized to like these dopamine hits, for example. So what a dopamine detox is not, it's not about like avoiding all pleasure and like doing nothing that could be fun or pleasurable or give you a dopamine hit. And it's also important to note that you can't just like reset dopamine levels overnight. I tried to look into this and I struggled to even figure out like what to look up here, because again, like a dopamine detox isn't really like a thing. So I tried to look like how long does it take to like, quote, reset dopamine levels or change your dopamine levels. I tried to figure out if there's an actual like window for how long something like this would take. And I had a hard time finding a straightforward answer because again, like a dopamine detox isn't really a thing that you can do. However, I did find a few things. I can give us some clues. So I did find that it takes kind of up to 90 days for dopamine levels to really change in the brain. But this was looking specifically for people who had low levels of dopamine. There's certain illnesses that you can have different things. Like I believe when I was looking, they said like people with like Parkinson's disease tend to have like lower dopamine. So if you're trying to like, for medical reasons, sort of raise the level of like brain dopamine, that this can take up to 90 days. But that's not what this whole dopamine detox thing is about. It's not about like drastically changing your dopamine like for medical reasons. But I did find a couple of studies saying that in that sort of a situation, like for medical reasons, for certain like different like neurological diseases and things, that it can take up to 90 days for levels to really change. But what I did find is that it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to really start seeing a noticeable change in your attention span. So like a big drastic change in your attention span, it usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks for you to really change your habits to see this like big change. However, I did find then somewhere else that it only takes 4 days to start changing your attention span. So I just want to call out the fact that I just told you two very different things. And when I was looking at these two, I think like in terms of helping to, and we know that for overstimulation too, right? It can be in the short term. So you can help support your overstimulation in minutes or hours. But also if you're looking at like a bigger overstimulation problem, that can be more long-term, like weeks or more to support it. But the 4 days versus 4 weeks thing. So I was comparing these two different studies that I found, and there was one, let me find it in my notes, the 4-day one, because I linked to it. Here we go. Okay, so when I was specifically looking into studies on meditation and attention span, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here because I want to talk about 4 weeks versus 4 days. So I found a 2010 study, and it showed that participants who practiced mindfulness meditation for just 4 days improved their ability to sustain attention on a task without being distracted. So this was really suggesting that even short-term meditation practice can enhance your cognitive control and reduce mind wandering in as little as 4 4 days, which is a major factor in diminished attention span. So in 4 days, you can kind of reduce your mind wandering. But then when I was looking on the flip side of like, how long does it actually change? How long does it take to like actually really change your attention span? It's going to be more of that like 4 to 6 week mark. So 4 days, you can kind of help reduce some of your mind wandering, but closer to like a month to really notice a big change in like your actual attention span and ability to like focus and concentrate and like stay with one thing at a time. So I just wanted to kind of distinguish those things, because as I was saying that out loud, I was like, I wrote both 4 to 6 weeks, and then I wrote 4 days as well. And those are two very different things. Okay, what a dopamine detox can do, it can give your brain a chance to resensitize to low stimulation activities. So creating intentional time away from high dopamine triggers like phones, YouTube, gaming, TikTok, those types of things can be really good. And if you're doing this, quote, dopamine detox, you can just give yourself a break from those high dopamine triggers, and it can help you slow down and reduce that chronic need for input and stimulation. So some things that people do on these digital detoxes, mindfulness breaks instead of like total withdrawal, and then like they might do like tech-free mornings or nature walks, silent meals, maybe 1 day off their phone per week was something that I saw. So yeah, it's kind of more, it's not even like a dopamine detox. It kind of seems like it's more like a digital break. And then of course that's going to have positive effects on your brain. So meditation and your attention span. Let's talk about it, because of course, what is one of the best things you can do for your ability to focus, concentrate, and hold your attention is to meditate. So meditation, it's not just because it feels good and it's relaxing, but it can reshape and structure the function of your brain, which we know particularly when it comes to attention. So research shows that regular meditation can increase your attention span, improve your ability to focus, and even change the way your brain processes information. If you've been listening to this podcast even for a short-ish while, you've heard me talk about these things, particularly like the prefrontal cortex, which we know is sort of like the main manager when it comes to attention. That's the part of the brain that gets bigger, stronger, and more organized with regular meditation. So the science behind meditation and attention is that research on meditation, it has really grown significantly over the last 2 decades, which is great because it's like as we're researching more about meditation in the brain is also when we're having this huge influx of like overstimulation, faster pace, like high dopamine type activities and like social media. And so we're able to like study how these real quick life change. I mean, I think about what social media was like even 5 years ago compared to today. So we're like, as we're studying this stuff more, we're also seeing these real life changes and we can like study them in real time, which is so cool. And so we know that regular meditation gives you increased gray matter in the brain, particularly in like the prefrontal cortex is one. That's Dr. Sarah Lazar, who I feel like talk about her all the time because I think she's amazing. And then improve sustained attention. So this is where there was that 4-day study. So meditation practices, especially those that focus on mindfulness and concentration, have been shown to enhance the brain's ability to maintain sustained attention over longer periods of time. This works because if you think about your meditation practice as a resistance band and your mind, your brain is like a muscle. Every time you meditate, it's like I think about this a lot. Not that I'm saying think about your brain as like your glutes. But for example, a lot of times when I've been working on rebuilding my strength, like after pork chop and poppy, I have to work on like core strength and glute strength, strength everywhere. But the thing that I find to be really challenging is like when you take the resistance bands and you put it around like your quads just above your knees, then you're in like the low squat and you like walk from side to side. I don't know what the technical like fitness term is for that, but then it's like, you know, the glute meads. I know the muscle, but then it's like, oh, like the outside of my butt is really burning. Think about that, or any kind of a resistance band type thing that you do where it's like you do a couple and you're like, oh, that's kind of tricky, but then you do a few more and you're like, wait, this is really starting to burn. Think about meditation in your brain in a similar way, where it's like when you first start, you might not have a lot of concentration strength in your brain. And then every time you meditate, it's like doing some reps with that resistance band. And then over time, you're going to be able to do more reps before you're like, oh my gosh, this is really hard, or this is really burning. And you're slowly building strength because you're creating that resistance. So when you're staying and you're meditating and then you go, oh, my mind has wandered, and then I bring it back, because that's the point of meditation. It's not to magically turn your brain off and to not think of anything. It's training your brain to be like, oh, I just got distracted. Oh, that's okay. I'm going to come back and I'm going to return to my point of concentration. I got distracted. Oh, I'm going to bring it back. That's the point of meditation. And that is that like resistance band. So every time you get distracted and come back, it's like doing one of those reps of taking a side step with that resistance band and like burning your butt cheeks. Do I think that some of the greats like John Kabat-Zinn would probably approve of my analogy there? Maybe not. But you know what? Real world application. It's what I think about. It's like you get distracted, you come back. That's a resistance band rep. You get distracted, you come back. That's another one. And the more that you do it, the more challenging it's going to be, but the more strength that you're building. So stronger focus and reduced distractibility. So mindfulness meditation teaches the brain to focus on the present moment. This is another piece too. So this really like training to be in the present moment has been shown to enhance attentional control, which means that meditation helps you to stay engaged in the task at hand and filter out distractions. So another study I came across was from 2007, and it found that participants who practiced mindfulness meditation had better sustained attention and less mind wandering during tasks that required concentration. And the researchers concluded that mindfulness training really helped to reduce this cognitive interference and the distractions that really derail your attention. And then I found that meditation builds your focus muscle. We kind of just talked about that. And this is because of neuroplasticity. So one of the best aspects about meditation is that it promotes neuroplasticity. So the brain's ability to change and adapt over time. Just by regularly practicing mindfulness and meditation, it can really train your brain to improve its focus and resist distractions, again, because of its activity, what it does to the prefrontal cortex. So some tips for how you can use meditation to improve your attention span. And then I have something that this episode inspired me to create, and I might regret it later because I have a lot on my plate, right? I have things that I'm trying to create right now. And famously, and by famously, I mean just like in my own life and in my own head, when I'm trying to create something, that's when I feel like inspiration hits to create something else. And anyways, we'll talk about that at the end. So some practical tips for using meditation to improve your attention span. Start small. So you don't need to meditate for an hour. You guys know this. Even 5 minutes a day of focused meditation can help improve your ability to focus and reduce some of that stimulation. Try a focused attention meditation. So this involves focusing on a single object or sensation like your breath. And every time you get distracted, bring your attention back to that one sensation or thing. And this helps to enhance your sustained attention and reduce distractibility. Sunday's meditation is a focused attention meditation. Using mindfulness throughout the day too is really great. So bringing mindfulness into just small everyday activities, going for a walk without listening to anything, just being present while you wash the dishes, putting your phone away while you play with your kids, that kind of stuff. It can help you stay present and increase your overall ability to concentrate and again, reduce the time spent on those like high dopamine activities and getting stuck in that like need reward loop. So I wanted to end with some ways that you can kind of work on reclaiming your attention span. The first one is going to be naming your top distractions. And this could be Instagram, it could be TikTok, whatever it is. Honestly, chances are your biggest distractions are your phone. So just go into your screen time app and look at where you're spending the most time, and you'll be able to kind of understand like what your biggest distractions are. And then this will give you an idea of like where to focus your attention. The key here is all about like awareness. So becoming mindful of the triggers and like what's pulling your focus away from other things. Also, so looking at like in your screen time app, where you're spending the most time on your phone, but also ask yourself in what situations. Is it in those little moments, right? Sitting at the red light and like you're on your phone, which is like kind of scary. Or like whatever it is, when there's another screen, when I'm watching a show, then I start scrolling too. Like asking yourself, what is my biggest distraction? And then what is the environment in which I'm most likely to kind of engage in that? Something that you can do is kind of create a little bit of challenge or friction, like putting obstacles in your path between like you and your distractions. So if you just make it even a little bit harder to access some of these things, that can make a big change. So that could be like moving apps off of your home screen, turning off notifications. One of the best things that I did for my well-being and my anxiety and also my attention span is I turned off the Gmail notifications. I did this years ago, and I used to every time, like when I was first starting Yoga for You, I remember vividly, I was in Michigan, and I just like, every time I'd get an email, I'd look at it because I'd be like, well, is it important? Is it someone emailing me about business stuff? And like, it was so distracting. It was so stressful. I also totally got rid of my Apple Watch years ago, and it's made a big thing so that I'm not constantly getting these notifications from things. And I'm not saying you have to do any of these. This is just what really worked for me. But turning off all Gmail notifications. Like I don't get push notifications for emails. I have set, like I go into my email inbox time, and then I'll go and like respond to all emails. And then when I'm not in that time, I'm not, unless something pops up that's time sensitive, I'm not in my emails. That's been really helpful, and getting rid of my Apple Watch. Using a real alarm clock instead of your phone. So this then will sort of shift you from like immediately reaching for your phone. And that's like the beginning of like hijacking your attention is like first thing, if your alarm's on your phone, then you pick it up to turn off your alarm. And then you're like, oh, well, now I'm on my phone. So I'll just start scrolling, or I'll start doing this. And then also turning your phone to black and white. I haven't tried this one. I've heard other people talking about it and finding success. There is a way, at least on iPhones, to, I don't know if other phones can do this too. I'm sure if you Google it, you can figure it out. You can set your phone to like just black and white, and it makes everything less stimulating, and you're much less likely to be on your phone. So that one I thought was a good one. I haven't tried it yet, but I kind of want to check that one out. So you're just making it, you're not eliminating distractions completely. You're just making it a little less appealing and a little less, you're just making it harder for yourself, which can kind of reduce that incentive to do it. You can also instead of replacing things, you don't have to just like remove stuff. You can just find meaningful alternatives. So instead of focusing just on like removal of distractions, removal of social media, you can do that too. You could also try replacing distractions with just more meaningful, low stimulus activities. So it's just really about creating these healthier subs, if you will. So swapping scrolling time with meaningful, low stimulus activities, journaling, walking, breath work, meditation, reading a book, reconnecting with like real world joys. Social media gives us a sense of connection to a degree, but also it just sort of moves us further and further away. So some of my favorite things to do, all of this, is kind of inspired other than me being like victimized by these apps that like, I swear I'm going to like open my back door and there will be like a blimp flying by my house with an ad for these apps, or like the next car that drives down my street, it'll have like a flag flying with these like app names on it. Like they won't leave me alone. And now that all I've been talking about, and my phone is like not very far away, so I'm sure it's here. I've been talking about these dopamine detoxes. It's just going to like double down. But some of my favorite ways to reconnect with real world, like joy, slowing down. You heard in the 90 days of changing habits episode that I've changed my morning routine, and I try not to do any phone time. Every once in a while, I do slip up or something comes up and I'm like, oh, I forgot to do that last night. I have to do it right away in the morning. But I've been swapping like the first 30 minutes and like scrolling or just looking at stuff, whatever, on my phone. Is I get up, I meditate, I journal, and then I read. And I'll do all those things in 30 minutes. I don't spend a ton of time on all of those, but I'm really loving it. It was hard at first, but even that has really changed a lot for me. I love just catching up with a friend. So getting coffee with a friend, like just putting my phone face down and like just chatting with them. I love a meaningful conversation of both talking and listening. Going for a walk. those types of things. I've really been enjoying going to yoga classes, as you've heard. So like my phone obviously stays in like the cubby with all my stuff. That type of stuff is, good. Even like cooking, I don't do a ton of cooking. And when I do cook, it's like quick to get something on the table. But if you love cooking, like just enjoying the act of cooking, playing with your kids. I love this one too. I love just like hanging out with my kids. Usually in the morning, Pork Chop wakes up really early. So if I do get to do my little morning routine first and then he wakes up, then we have special mom Pork Chop time until we have to go wake up Poppy. Eye contact and conversations. We are losing the ability to hold eye contact. So just practicing full present engagement with the people around you, looking into their eyes when they're talking, both talking and listening. That kind of stuff actually helps to not only foster deeper connections, but strengthen your attention. So that is what I have for you in this episode. I was inspired, and so I'm going to go for it. I was going back and forth as to like, do I really have time to do this? And I'm just into all of this that as I was writing these notes, I had my little notebook next to me and I wrote down a little plan. So I'm actually going to go get it and I'll share it with you. Okay, I'm back. I just ran down the hallway and I got my little notebook. So as I was doing this and I was reading all these things, I was like, you know what? We could be doing this too. Like we should do something together. And I talked about this in the other episode in the 90 days. I was like, we could be doing something. And so I was kind of inspired by the 5-day nervous system reset, which I know you guys loved. So many of you have done that and I've gotten great feedback on it. So I thought, you know what, even though I'm in the thick of, you'll hear about this in a little bit, I'm in the thick of recording all the videos for Yoga Nidra teacher training, which is going to be up and running very soon. I was like, you know what I should do right now when I'm in the middle of a big project? Start a new project. So we're going to do a 5-day, I'm calling it Stop the Scroll. That was the best I could come up with. And I'm looking here at my notebook and it's literally just kind of like chicken scratch like ideas as I mapped this out. However, when this episode goes live, there will be a landing page that you can click on. The link is in the show notes. I'm about to go create it and then publish this episode. But we are going to start on, what was the date that I said? That part I didn't write in my notes. Okay, Monday, April 20. Actually, should we do that or should we start? Nope, the day before that is Easter, so I don't think that's a good day to start. We are actually going to start on, I'm making the executive decision now, Wednesday, April 23rd, because I want this to go over a weekend as well, because what we're going to do with this, we're going to do 5 days. We're going to meditate every day. Obviously. Would it be a mindful in minutes challenge without a meditation? No, my like one true love in life. No, we're doing it. We're going to meditate every day, but also every day for 5 days, we're going to do 30 minutes of some kind of an activity. So I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I'm really excited. But like, for example, you are going to, like in our little challenge for one of the days, one of the activities is to go on a walk without any technology in hand. If you're going to bring your phone for safety, no problem. Take it, put it in your pocket. So we'll have a daily meditation and then like one activity. I know sometimes some of these activities might be a little easier to do on the weekend. So we're going to do that. And my hang up was with creating this when I was talking in the 90 days is like, the only way I know how to share information with you guys and to connect with you is online. Like usually this will be like via email. So every day I'll email you something. If you are listening to this in the future, if it's past the 23rd, look at the link in the show notes because I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the 5-day nervous system reset where I ran it live. And then after that, I created it so then you can go back and do it on your own time. But I really like running it live first so that we can do it all together and like we can talk. And I just think it's more meaningful that way. So April 23rd, which is 2 weeks from today. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the 27th. So Wednesday through a Sunday. We have the 5-day Stop the Scroll challenge. Maybe I'll come up with a better name, but that's all I have in my little chicken scratch right now. And it's designed to, in those 5 days, because we know studies tell us even in 4 days, we can increase our attention span, but it's going to help us reduce our time spent in kind of these high dopamine, like getting out of these like traps, these like infinite loops. And we're going to try to reduce that. We're going to try to reduce, it's not a dopamine detox. It's not even necessarily a full like digital detox. We're just going to try to make some of these better swaps so that we can start finding some joy and be able to slow down and do simple things and to not be constantly restless, because all of this at the end of the day leads to anxiety. It leads to us being restless. It leads to us being frustrated. It leads to us just not being the people that we want to be. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You'll be able to click it, put your email address in, and we're going to start on the 23rd. I've made the executive decision that we're going to do this because I'm really excited about it. And I mapped out the 5 days here on my notebook that I'm looking at. And yeah, I'm excited about that. So join me for that. I'll also put the link if you're like, Kelly, what's the 5-day nervous system reset? I think you'll like that one too. We're going to do a similar format for this one, where every day you will get an email. It'll have like some instructions, and then there'll be an audio file. The audio file will have a little bit like, usually it's like 5 minutes tops of like a little bit of learning. So for example, like the day that then your activity is to go walk without your phone or without listening to anything, I'll give you some instruction on that, and I'll kind of explain the science as to like why we're doing it and how it's helping you. So we'll do a little bit of learning, and then we will go into the meditation as well. And then, we'll do that for 5 days, and link is in the show notes. So I hope to see you there. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found this episode to be as interesting as I did. I loved really diving into it, and I'm really looking forward to creating this Stop the Scroll challenge for all of you. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you on Sunday for a focused attention